We're going to switch gears here to talk about the prospects for peace in Syria, what could prove to be an important step forward as key players in the three-year-old war are set to sit down for their first direct peace talks this week in Switzerland. Could it lead to a breakthrough? Big stumbling blocks, though, already. First off, a diplomatically awkward and potentially seriously problematic moment as the UN Secretary General had to withdraw his invitation to Syria, the Syrian government's ally, Iran, just one day after he'd issued it. If not, Syrian opposition said it wouldn't even come to the negotiations. And then some shocking pictures emerged. A team of international forensic experts has images and other evidence that the Syrian government tortured and killed 11,000 prisoners. Quite disturbing. All that and the discussions haven't even started. Let's talk about the prospects for the Geneva II negotiations. Nader Hashemi, co-editor of the book The Syria Dilemma, joins us. He is associate professor of Middle East and Islamic politics at the University of Denver. We appreciate your being with us, Professor. Can you talk about your feeling here right now? I mean, given all that's already happened, what is the prospect for anything really being a breakthrough in Geneva?
Well, if anyone is expecting a breakthrough in Geneva, I think they're going to be disappointed, largely because the Geneva process and the Geneva communique effectively grants the key protagonist to the conflict, the Syrian regime, veto power over its success. I mean, the key phrase in the Geneva communique states that the parties, by mutual consent, are to discuss a the setting up of a transitional authority, which means that there'll never be mutual consent because, Assad has not come to Geneva to negotiate his own demise from power. So that's why I'm very pessimistic.
Did the disinvitation of the Iranians, do you think that has become any sort of bigger stumbling block as a diplomatic problem, besides being something of an embarrassment for Ban Ki-moon?
No, I don't think so. I mean, Iran is a player in the Syrian conflict, but effectively Iran's interests are being represented by the Assad regime, number one, and by Russia. So I don't think that in any way sort of is going to substantively change the prospects for peace, which I think really are to be located in the nature, the structural, I think, flaws in the Geneva process, and the fact that the one key party that's responsible for this conflict has veto power over anything moving forward.
And what about the pictures? I mean, these are quite horrific. The indications of significant and widespread torture and abuse. How serious a problem is that for the Syrians as they enter the negotiations?
Well, I think it's very serious for the Syrian opposition, obviously, because they have to sit across the table from the side that's responsible for those pictures. And so it's been very difficult for the Syrian opposition to agree to come to the table, primarily for that reason. And so it's going to complicate the process. I think the pictures are nothing new. It confirms what we already know, that we're dealing with a brutal regime that is pursuing policies that are borderline genocidal. The big question is, what is the international community going to do about those pictures? Are they going to sort of pursue policies that can bring an end to this horror story? Or are they going to simply allow the Syrian regime to be respected at the international table, given a voice, and if it refuses to compromise, is everyone just going to go back home and throw their hands up in the air? I think that's the big question that primarily President Obama and Secretary of State Kerry need to answer. And
we have talked on this program quite a bit about the refugee situation, the enormous numbers of families, children who have been forced from their homes, both internally and externally displaced. Is there any indication that there could be movement to provide greater aid for them?
Well, there was a big meeting in Kuwait last week where there's been a lot of pledges, but of course the Syrian refugees don't want to stay refugees, they want to go home. So I think, dealing simply with the refugee problem, divorced from the roots of the conflict that has produced these refugees, and all indications are that more refugees are going to be produced over the course of the coming year, suggests that the plight and the prospects of refugees does not look very good until and unless the roots of the conflict are going to be addressed in these diplomatic negotiations. And it doesn't seem, based on the structure and the setup of the Geneva process, that the roots of this conflict that produced this conflict and produced those refugees are going to be addressed.
So it does seem like a long-term process. We appreciate your being with us. Nader Hashemi, professor of Middle East and Islamic politics at the University of Denver. Thanks for being with us.
Thanks.